We believed cell phones had hit a point where innovation seemed impossible, but this device proves that's not true. Hello and thanks for joining a new video. Today we're reviewing the POCO F8 Ultra. Let's begin. We're discussing POCO's flagship, though the term can confuse, as it's not competing with other brands' flagships in all aspects. It's the top range from this manufacturer, known for competing heavily on price, making it very attractive in its category in Mexico. The initial launch price is set at 14,999 pesos for the basic configuration, which includes 12 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigabytes of storage. This price is approximately $825. However, keep in mind that the prices here might differ from those over there. There's a version with 16 gigabytes of RAM and 512 gigabytes of storage for 15,999 pesos, around $880. Both are very competitive compared to what we offer, and among competitors, you'll find the iPhone 16, Oppo Reno 14 5G, Red Magic 11 Pro, Nubia Z60 Ultra, and Galaxy S25. Fee, and in numerous aspects, it can easily outperform most of its competitors with remarkable ease. Obviously, it won't be an ideal cell phone, however, it would be quite appealing. Keep in mind that right now. One of its disadvantages is that it is apparently out of stock. It went on sale in the free market and in official Xiaomi stores, but at least at the time of recording this video is no longer in free market. It might have been a success when it was first launched, and honestly with good reason. It's definitely a highly competitive device. However, one of its main drawbacks would be that this of its acquisition, because if you limit your distribution to online purchases, I get that some people are not willing to buy it that way, so possibly that will be a small disadvantage. You happen to have a physical Xiaomi store nearby, you can go and inquire if it's available there. However, that would be the primary hurdle. On the other hand, this situation allows you to significantly adjust its cost. Therefore, let's delve into it thoroughly, examining it point by point. This way we can fully describe it and you can become familiar with both its advantages and disadvantages. Let's begin by physically describing the device. On the front, you'll notice that it features ultra-thin bezels, which are very well executed in this regard. This aspect is also protected by a little shield glass. However, we haven't conducted specific tests on its durability, so we cannot confidently determine how good or bad this glass might be. Therefore, in this sense, we must admit that it generates a bit of uncertainty for us. We are uncertain if it's the renowned Gorilla Glass or a similar material, yet we don't disregard the possibility that the brand itself might be causing its own issues. Efforts to make its own glass, I view that positively. Within the frames we have aluminum, which provides excellent resistance against falls. For instance, it will protect quite well. On the right side there are the volume buttons and the power button, while at the top there's the secondary audio output. The left side is entirely clean, and this view allows us to appreciate its thickness of 7.9 millimeters. The bottom part of the device is very competitive, lowering the thickness with respect to the last generation in a very marked way. At the bottom, we discover the tray that allows us to insert two SIM cards. Along with the microphone, you will find the USB-C port, and there is also the main speaker grille featuring multiple perforations. The back cover is crafted from glass, but to be more exact, it is actually made of fiberglass. This device weighs in at 218 grams, which is a slight increase compared to the previous generation. However, it feels exceptionally premium in the hand, offering a very satisfying tactile experience. The touch quality is truly impressive, and the truth is that I had a long time that POCO did not give me such a premium feeling in the hand. In this particular case, we are also going to encounter a traditional rectangular camera module from POCO. Yes, believe it or not, POCO actually introduced this design earlier than the iPhone. To be even more precise, the iPhone followed in its footsteps. And back here, without a doubt, is the biggest surprise of this entire device, which happens to be the rear subwoofer by both. We will discuss this detail more in a moment, but honestly, it also appears very appealing in terms of design. Also, this device features aluminum on the camera module and around each lens, providing resistance to falls. It's well designed for protection and boasts an IP68 rating, so it is indeed water resistant without facing any issues. While it doesn't have the IP69 rating like some other even more affordable devices that are beginning to incorporate that feature, I honestly don't view it as a negative aspect. Especially in a device that aims to keep its cost reasonable, having IP68 is already quite sufficient. The fact is an excellent resistance to any accidental fall into the water. It is also available in black, which is the edition that I own. This version looks quite elegant and isn't overly dark, thanks to its slightly satin finish. This means fingerprints are not easily marked. Additionally, there is a black edition, which is the one I have. In denim, that would be super interesting to have in hand. Although unfortunately, that option is not available around here, but it certainly could stand out as an intriguing and interesting choice. As a substitute for traditional smartphone materials, the screen measures 6'9" inches, which is quite large indeed. This is possible because the bezels are 1.5 millimeters. They aren't completely symmetrical since the bottom bezel is 168 millimeters, yet they appear nearly symmetrical. It looks fantastic, offering a truly expansive screen that is larger than the previous generation. However, the resolution is slightly reduced. Resolution exceeds 416 pixels per inch, reaching 1200 x 2608 pixels, but truthfully, neither. This is something quite dramatic. The fact that its resolution has decreased, yet it still maintains a higher density than 400. To be precise, it reaches 416 pixels per inch. For reference, the last generation reached 526, which did offer us a greater sharpness, but beyond 400 is hardly perceptible to the human eye at the distance at which we usually see the cell phones. So the truth is that I do not consider that this technology is a very serious matter, even though it represents a step backwards. When it comes to specifications, the screen. AMOLED provides us with excellent technology featuring. It has a really nice color. In this instance, we provide two different modes for color calibration, which are Color Pro, Original, and Vivid. Here, we don't have many options, but the display looks great right out of the box. It includes manual or automatic color temperature adjustment with adaptive color, ensuring it always looks good. Xiaomi features Hyper RGB technology, enhancing sharpness and style like a TV. It comes with an option that makes movements appear more fluid on the screen due to a dedicated chip being incorporated. Although this option is off by default, you can activate it, but be aware it will consume more battery. The screen's brightness has been increased from the last generation, now reaching up to 3500 nits. The visualization you get from this screen outdoors is truly excellent, and importantly, it can also utilize high brightness peaks. HDR content because it supports the HDR10 as standard. I could, for example, test it on platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and even Netflix because it supports Dolby Vision. Additionally, the content captured by the device's camera is also shown in HDR on this screen. It looks truly great, spectacular in that aspect. Another area where it stands out is in the lower brightness, which isn't always mentioned. However, in this case, it can go down to just 180, making it really quite comfortable at night. Even without an extra dimming feature, it still manages to get really very low. In this situation, the attenuation is achieved not through pulses but by using current. Many manufacturers opt for pulse dimming to avoid color distortion at the lowest brightness. However, the reality is that this screen maintains good color quality even at its lowest brightness setting, and it does not produce the flickering sensation that can be caused by other manufacturers' screens. Even though many people are placing bets on a pulse that is dimming. With a really high refresh rate to avoid flickering, in this situation, Little takes an alternative approach to dim the screen by adjusting the current, which appears quite interesting and visually appealing. Of course, if you combine all these features with the dark mode and also the reading mode, you will have a really excellent experience at night or in very dim environments. Additionally, to top it all off, it comes with the 120 Hz, as expected, providing exceptional fluidity when you are interacting with various types of content. Let's discuss the sound, which is where we discover the most remarkable aspect of this device that is already performing exceptionally well. It boasts a high-end design and an impressive high-end screen, but when it comes to sound, it actually surpasses even high-end expectations. In this instance, they have formed a historic partnership with Bose, a manufacturer renowned for its prestige in the commercial audio industry. Undoubtedly, the experience here will be extraordinary and supreme. Not only does it feature stereo speakers with one located on the bottom and another on the top, which is typically what we expect from high-end devices, but this time it takes it a step further by adding an additional subwoofer on the back. Trust me, this inclusion makes a significant difference. The sound quality is elevated to a whole new level, especially when considering it's coming from a smartphone. It offers an impressive presence of bass frequencies, and the lowest frequencies are distinctly audible on this device. The truth is that the sound itself is the most spectacular. Probably the best device in this aspect, and to talk about a device of this category, price comes to be completely outstanding, but let's listen to a small test, but remember that it is not the same to hear it live.
Ven y baila junto a mí.
Working with Bose not only looks at the hardware level, where they already do an excellent job, but also at the software level, something that I loved. Not integrated Dolby Atmos, but it integrates a whole section of sound configuration by voice, where we will find two profiles to choose from, dynamic or balanced. After that, we still have some other options to choose from if we want to give priority to a slightly wider and surround sound, or we want to give priority, for example, to highlight the voice. However, if you wish to be more precise, you have the option to access an equalizer. Specifically, it is a 10-band equalizer, and there are some presets available for you to select from as well. Personally, I adore the sound quality. It is already excellent with the factory settings. Nevertheless, having access to an equalizer is fantastic because there might be certain songs where you aren't fond of the default equalization, and you can adjust it here quite effectively. For individuals who love to consume a significant amount of audio content, this device is truly the best choice they could possibly have. Furthermore, it offers a software feature that allows you to independently control the volume of various applications. This means you can have multiple things playing simultaneously, each at different levels of intensity. Nonetheless, as you might anticipate from a device positioned in the high-end segment, it does not come with a headphone jack. Although fortunately, if you have a pair of wireless headphones that support high-resolution codecs, they are perfectly compatible with this cell phone. This is because it supports not only the basic codecs, but also LHDC, aptX, as well as its adaptive and LDAC versions. Therefore, we have the entire catalog available, and there is absolutely nothing to complain about. Now, concerning the microphones, we will find 3 located around the device, according to the official information provided by the manufacturer. So it's likely that one microphone is concealed somewhere in this grid that we can't quite see, because visibly we can spot one on the bottom and another on the camera module. Therefore, there must be another one that's somewhat hidden here. But let's proceed to test how these microphones would function, for instance, in a call setting. First, take a moment to listen to the ambient noise we have at the moment.
Ahora estás escuchando el audio captado por este micrófono durante una llamada en este mismo ambiente ruidoso.
As you noticed, noise reduction works perfectly. The voice is picked up correctly in the sidebar during calls. You can toggle noise cancellation on or off. Now, let's test these microphones in a simulated concert environment, right? And as you could hear, they perform exceptionally well without any distortion. You can clearly notice the frequency shift when we direct it towards different sections of the speaker. And in fact, they accurately reproduce the sound that we initially recorded. The device's vibration was spectacular, as it could pick up those bass frequencies and then reproduce them in a very faithful way. I think it's a very good device in this regard. And to finish off this block, it also has vibration motor on the x-axis, as we would expect from a device of this price, and even with intensity adjustment. So the sensation feels premium in the hand when you're using a switch, or when it bounces, or when you use the keyboard. It creates a premium vibration, unlike simple vibration motors in other devices. The front camera features a 22mm lens with an f2.2 aperture, fixed focus. It utilizes a 32-megapixel sensor. It's clear that we are not dealing with a full-fledged flagship model here. The sensor, which is 32 megapixels, seems to be an older one. I suspect this because several manufacturers use this same 32-megapixel sensor, and it typically does not provide the level of detail we might expect. However, we'll take a closer look in just a moment. At the moment, the main criticism we can make is that this front camera lacks autofocus. Given the category it competes in, we could reasonably expect that feature. However, the truth is that this device offers us more in other aspects than what we could reasonably demand at this price point. Therefore, I mention this only to attempt to create a balance in our overall assessment of the device. It's clear you'll need to make sacrifices in some areas, but if taking a selfie was your main priority, well, at this point you might find yourself a bit disappointed, at least for the time being, while reading through the specifications. However, let's take a moment to see the results shortly. You'll notice that we have several convenient shortcuts available. For instance, we can double tap the volume down button to swiftly open the camera when the device is locked. Additionally, this feature will also function when the device is already unlocked by using the 2-tap gesture on the power button. It's a shortcut we can use anytime on or off, providing great agility. When you're busy and suddenly want to snap a quick photo. It works well, but these gestures are off by default, so you'll need to turn them on here. If you thought they were in the camera settings, they're actually in the system's additional settings under gesture shortcuts. Take note that the experience will be sufficiently snappy on the front camera here. While it's not the quickest camera we've encountered, it provides 2 distinct levels of amplitude. You'll find several beauty mode options over here, each with its own slider to adjust the intensity. For instance, it offers us even teeth whitening, if you want your hairline to be marked. Well, the truth is that it involves numerous parameters, including a variety of makeup options. We will also find access to various color filters which we can preview in real time and adjust their intensity as needed. It also supports live photos, or dynamic shooting as this brand calls it, which records a short video when you take a picture to relive memories differently. Notice the button here at the bottom. Therefore, you can extract an additional moment from that photo, or alternatively, you can select from a variety of effects, such as bouncing or playing the video in reverse. This way, you have the option to choose the specific effect you wish to apply when you are viewing that live photo. If we slide from top to bottom, you'll notice that we can access additional options like the timer and the choice to include or exclude the watermark. Here, you also have the ability to enable various shutter types. For example, you can tap anywhere on the camera interface to take pictures, use palm recognition, and even have an extra shutter that can be positioned anywhere you like. As you can see, just taking it off from the main shutter is effective, and the palm detector functions correctly, activating the timer for a comfortable photo capture. Actually, using the volume buttons, you can also snap pictures of yourself, but remember that it will activate the timer as well, unlike other devices that capture immediately. And it could result in the photo being taken exactly when you accidentally move the cell phone while trying to press the button. So, I think it's beneficial that it includes a timer feature. You can set the timer or just turn it off. If you don't want the timer, use buttons as a shutter or adjust zoom in selfie settings. You can enable or disable rotation like all phones and also remove moles. Just interesting. And considering it comes equipped with HyperOS 3, it additionally provides us with the capability to alter how we view the camera modes. Previously, there was simply a button for this purpose. The camera remains at the bottom of the mode list, but now you swipe up to access other camera modes. Interestingly, the interface features yellow highlights on some elements, which you can now customize in the camera's general settings. Something I haven't seen on other phones before. Let's take a look now at the results. This camera is expected to provide us with a high level of detail. The 32 megapixels indeed appear to be effective. However, since it has a fixed focus, you need to be at a relatively close distance to the camera. If you begin to move away slightly and even opt for the widest angle, the detail level will decrease. Nevertheless, it seems that the focus is still well managed at various distances where we typically take selfies, and in that regard, it performs quite well. The issue arises when you aim to display an object up close, as it won't be able to focus properly at such a short distance. In situations with backlighting, the preview view isn't optimized and appears overexposed. However, once you take the photo, it seems to achieve a decent balance between highlights and shadows. The only downside here is that it creates a slightly odd effect along the edges. It's not a major problem, but you can notice that it's not the quality of a high-end camera. However, due to the incredible power of this processor, I believe they achieve an exceptionally good result. Notice that at night, for instance, it performs excellently in maintaining a high level of detail on the face, while still having enough control. I think it balances well to have a detailed photo, though AI tries to generate some details. As you can see here, there are some areas of the mustache that look a bit fake or artificial that you can distinguish if you get really close to the image, but from far away, the truth is that it looks really very good quality. However, if you don't have some front lighting, as in this case, notice that the level of detail will be much lower, and even here, you will have other complications in dealing with noise. So it actually took up part of my beard and mustache. You can really see that it went through quite a bit of struggle in this particular scenario. The same situation will occur in this other photograph, where we can already observe a slightly dimmer lighting. It might struggle a bit if you approach closely to examine the details, but if you don't get too near, honestly, the outcome still appears quite positive. Now, we are examining a few final examples of backlit night photography, and when you lean in closer to the screen for a better view, if we brighten the face a bit, the color seems quite distorted. So it gives us an understanding that this camera is not that competitive in this aspect. Fortunately, the portrait mode effect is quite nice when it comes to the bokeh it can generate. It appears very professional. Moreover, the image maintains good sharpness, controlling noise well, unlike the disastrous way the iPhone handles this type of photography. It's also worth noting that when we took the same photo during the day, we observed excellent performance because it kept the objects in focus. It won't always do it, but it's behaved well in this regard. On the back we find 18mm ultra-wide camera with aperture f2.4, fixed focus and a 50 megapixel sensor. Then the 23mm main camera with aperture f1.67, autofocus, optical stabilization and 50 megapixel light fusion 900. Sensor with a size of 1 or 1.3 inches, it's huge. And finally, the 115mm inner telephoto camera with aperture f3.0, autofocus, and of course it also gives us a 50 megapixel sensor. Couple of things to note here. The ultra-wide camera is definitely not at the level of a flagship device. Here you can also notice that it is not yet a cell phone that will compete among the highest segment of the entire market. Here it is an important sacrifice because for starters it is not such a wide camera, it is 18mm, so there are others that are much wider, 15mm. In addition, the aperture. It's a bit limited with f2.4 smartphone cameras, so it's not very bright and lacks autofocus. It is quite evident that this is a basic camera. However, in the main camera, they utilize a truly flagship sensor of enormous size, which will allow for an incredible amount of light to enter when discussing a cell phone. Observing this in such a price range is going to be extremely appealing. Soon we will examine its results. Additionally, it is important to highlight that for the first time, this brand's device includes a 115mm periscope lens. It means it has 5x optical zoom capability. This is a significant and important leap from the last generation's lens, which was 60mm. However, it is also noticeable that it isn't entirely premium yet, because the f3.0 aperture could make things a bit complicated in low light conditions when you're trying to do long distance photography. Additionally, it can't focus as closely as the last generation could for macro-style photography, but it still offers some assistance and can be helpful. We'll see the results in a moment. The truth of the matter is that the different lenses have high-resolution sensors, so they allow for different cropping as well. Notice, for example, how we are here in the camera and at 2x we find a crop, for example. If we move to 5x, you will also find 10x with crop available. However, it does not offer us as many settings as some other devices in that aspect. However, it allows us to use AI to enhance zoom for long distances, which we'll explore shortly. There is a specific button dedicated to exposure compensation, which is incredibly handy. This feature is particularly useful when cell phones fail to interpret darker environments accurately. Often cell phones tend to overexpose images in such conditions, but we will examine the result later on. Additionally, we find another button that allows us to load various color filters and even activate a beauty mode. However, this beauty mode comes with just a single parameter. Unlike the more detailed options available for selfies, we'll also find the option of live photo, and in this instance it introduces the super macro feature. This option will indicate that you need to maintain a distance of approximately 30 centimeters from the object you wish to photograph. This is why I mentioned earlier that it doesn't focus as closely as the telephoto camera from the previous generation. However, since it offers greater optical zoom, we are essentially discussing of the same thing. Additionally, we will find ourselves with the self-timer option. However, be careful as it lacks a clear indicator to show that you are in macro mode. So, if you ever open the camera and wonder what's happening, why isn't it letting me zoom in? Well, the reason is that you have macro mode turned on. You need to log in here to turn it off, and once you do that, it gives us access to the other cameras. You'll notice that the photography is really quick and responsive, which is excellent in this regard. Actually, if you press and hold, you can record a short video. But if you slide to the side, you can capture a burst of up to 100 photos. In our test, as we tried to capture the number 3, we observed that the lens's response speed, indeed impressive. The burst mode initiates very quickly as well, with minimal delay between each photo, maintaining an excellent sequence of the images. This offers a very polished experience in this aspect. Additionally, as you can see at the top, there's a special mode designed to capture motion with greater accuracy. By sliding from the bottom to the top, we gain access to more modes. In fact, we have the ability to modify the interface, allowing us to include additional modes within our scroll bar. Pro mode is available, offering manual parameters. We can adjust exposure compensation, shutter speed up to 30 seconds, ISO up to 12,800, with the main camera, white balance control, and focus control. We can also create and save presets for quick access with one touch. Our preferred manual photo settings, which are extremely useful. On the left side, we have additional buttons to further adjust the image style, including options like contrast, temperature, and even cyan and magenta control. These are alongside saturation and sharpness settings. As you can see, there are numerous controls available, in addition to the photo filters that can also be selected from this interface. Moreover, in this section we will have the option to choose whether we prefer to capture our images in the RAW format or in the more common JPEG format. Additionally, it is important to note that we can also capture these images in high resolution, ensuring the best possible quality for our photographs. Here we have a display of the histogram, and I find it quite curious that in the general settings of the camera, we also have access to some modifiers of the preview. These modifiers allow us, for example, to highlight the focus so that you are always aware of what exactly the camera is focusing on. Furthermore, you can even check the exposure to enable some lines to indicate the overexposed areas. This is, of course, in addition to the histogram. Even though those options are turned on in the general camera settings, you will find them only in the Pro Camera section. As for Smart Capture, keep in mind that if you're looking to scan a document, it still won't recognize it from the main camera interface. However, it does provide quick access to a document mode, where you'll see that it also gives us a few filters at the top to choose from, like black and white or an enhanced color setting. However, it remains a basic scanner that merely crops the primary image. While it does allow us to edit after capturing, such as cropping, straightening, removing stains, or applying color filters, it still doesn't permit adding multiple pages to a document and exporting them as a PDF. You know, in Google Drive, you do have access to a more complete scanner. Still, I really wish we could see a fully featured scanner integrated directly into the manufacturer's camera interface. Let's now review the results. First, in high resolution mode, where you notice that I think the ultra wide camera is not seen to maintain 100% of the sharpness, but, well, it does allow us to apply some cropping and still maintain a good image quality. The main camera is the one with the most attractive sensor, and if it is seen to take advantage perfectly well of this high resolution mode to bring us closer and still notice very detailed images. And the telephoto camera additionally provides us with access to this high resolution mode, so I believe in every aspect it performs quite admirably. However, it is noticeable that the sensors in both the ultra-wide camera and the telephoto camera are not of the highest quality. But if you pay attention even in auto mode, we can observe that the ultra-wide camera manages chromatic aberration quite effectively. Although, since it is a less wide camera compared to some others, we could say it has a slightly easier task. The color is seen as well handled in all three and generally of good quality without distortion. Color is perceived to be handled well in any of the three cameras. Cameras, although it is not completely 100% consistent and equal, it notes that from various focal lengths, we can achieve good image quality. POCO is a manufacturer that wasn't initially known for providing cameras of a very high level, but now it appears that the rear cameras will be able to compete effectively. Take a look here at another gallery of photos just to get a better idea of the quality of the zoom from different focal lengths. For instance, at 46mm, which corresponds to 2x digital zoom, you might observe that it's digital zoom. However, if you don't zoom in too closely on the image, you can still appreciate very good detail. At 115mm, we switch to the periscope camera. This camera appears to have colors that are somewhat more saturated than usual, so it doesn't seem as natural in that aspect. Nevertheless, it allows us to reach 230mm, equivalent to 10x digital zoom, yet it appears to retain optical quality. If you zoom in closely on the image, I believe you can actually see a very good level of detail. So up to 10 times zoom behavior is excellent. Even here, note, it's 30x digital zoom. Through AI, it tries to optimize so the letters or distinct figures can be enhanced in clarity, allowing us to continue zooming in up to a maximum magnification of 100 times. Digital, although in this situation you clearly rely entirely on artificial intelligence 100% and how it interprets and comprehends the figures. For instance, in this particular case, we have an additional gallery of photographs that I'm eager to. I want you to view it gradually from various focal distances, but now that a face is present, that's when artificial intelligence can typically encounter more issues. Up to 10x, the result is excellent and it doesn't rely heavily on artificial intelligence. Zooming into 20x, we still see positive results. At 30x, details decrease and there's more aquarium effect in the camera. As I mentioned, it allows zooming into 100x, but the image becomes more blurred, though it does a pretty interesting job. However, if you examine other photos here, starting from 10x, which is quite a distance, you'll notice a decent quality. As we move closer, observe how artificial intelligence optimizes in various ways. For instance, at 30x, it appears quite good. Continuing to zoom in, you'll see significant variations depending on how artificial intelligence interprets objects under backlit conditions. Observe that the preview is very well optimized, displaying no overexposed or burned out areas, which is certainly quite positive. After capturing the picture, the ultra-wide camera shows some chromatic aberration. It's not too serious, but it does confirm that it isn't a top-tier camera. The main camera significantly improves in this aspect and keeps a well-balanced highlight and shadows, good details. It is an image that looks good even applying the 2x crop. We still see something positive, slightly darker the shadow area, but it looks pretty good, and even with the telephoto camera also maintains this good behavior in backlight. Even applying the 10x crop, it still looks good in this aspect. And for the nights, it has indeed surprised me positively. It's worth noting that the ultra-wide camera is already doing a pretty good job of balancing the most illuminated areas from the light sources in this photograph. Even though when you get closer, there might not be as much detail. To take a photo with the ultra-wide camera is still quite impressive. Now, when it comes to the main camera, it significantly enhances the level of detail. It looks truly spectacular. It balances the detail remarkably well, and overall, it's a very high-quality camera. Ideal. The light sources that are present within the frame, along with good color saturation. Great capture of the warm tones present then. The truth is, in my opinion, that it seems like an exceptionally good camera. This main camera, if you notice, is clearly a high-end one. Even when applying a 46mm cut, it still manages to maintain optical quality, unlike other devices that at night fail to provide the same quality zoom we observe during the day. When we switch to the 5x camera, it will obviously see a slight drop in its dynamic range, but that's quite natural. The key point here is that when aiming at a light source or a well-lit area, it still manages to maintain excellent detail, even up to 10 times digital zoom without a light source in view. The ultra-wide camera, I believe, struggles more in night scenes. If it creates artifacts in the darker parts of the image, you can easily tell it's a lower quality camera. A primary camera, in my opinion, tends to oversaturate the colors a bit excessively. As I mentioned earlier, these devices often either overexpose the images or make them darker, yet the resulting image appears quite impressive. However, it doesn't seem as true to life. The actual scene had less saturation and lighting, but for capturing a photo you intend to share or preserve in your memories, I believe it looks quite appealing. It even resembles a scene with significantly more lighting than in real life. In very dark areas, the telephoto camera is disabled. Even if it allows up to 5 times zoom, it uses the main camera. The telephoto has a closed aperture, limiting results. In fact, even when using 10x digital zoom with the main camera, you'll notice that it still performs quite decently. However, it's important to point out that the telephoto camera is not activated when you're in extremely dark scenes. Despite this limitation, the main camera manages to capture night scenes fairly well. Now, when it comes to macro photography, take note that this is the closest you can get with the main camera, which is actually remarkably close. Well, considering that it is a camera with a very good level of detail. In fact, if you apply zoom 2x, notice that we have very good macro photography. In fact, it performs very well. The telephoto camera lets us focus more or less at this distance. That's why I tell you that it doesn't have very intense telemacro capabilities either. But since it allows us to get up to 10x zoom, note that it would allow us to have good quality macro photography without becoming a specialist. For moving scenes, note that the ultra-wide camera does not perform well. Even with action mode on, the image lacks a sweeping effect, especially with fast movements, but the main camera performs excellently. Sure, if you activate action mode with a quicker shutter, it can better capture movements. However, it doesn't appear to specialize like some other devices we've seen from top companies. In this particular case, without the action mode enabled, using the telephoto camera results in a noticeable sweep effect. When the action mode is turned on, the sweep effect is still present, although it is lessened. However, you might also notice some distortion, which could be considered natural. Nevertheless, there are other devices available that might perform better in this regard. As for portrait photography, I found this device appealing because it allows us to capture images from various focal lengths, offering versatility in our shots. Look here, for instance. We're seeing with the 115mm setting a pretty good photograph in terms of foreground and background detection. The bokeh effect applied for the background also looks nice. In every way, it truly stands out as a remarkably competitive portrait camera, even in somewhat broader contexts. If you lessen the intensity of the bokeh effect, it actually understands quite well which lens or focal length you are using to create a nice photograph of it. So, it's definitely going to be a camera that you can enjoy using in portrait mode, with a variety of different styles and more. Here, it's important to note that the telephoto camera, for instance, already naturally produces this nice depth of field effect. However, when you use portrait mode, it can be artificially enhanced to create an even more appealing result. Therefore, it's undoubtedly a camera that, in portrait mode, is going to be very well liked and appreciated by many. For video recording, we will find 8K at 30 frames per second available with the main camera, something that is brutal, definitely a demonstration of the good capabilities of both the processor and the high-end sensor that integrates for the main camera. Even though the other rear cameras can also capture in 4K at 60 frames per second, which is quite remarkable. Actually, with any of the rear cameras, the slow motion and fast motion features are also available, which is very impressive. The options that have traditionally been are exclusive to the main camera. Still, it's positive that Xiaomi allows us to utilize any camera in these extra modes within the main interface while recording video. We will have buttons to pause and resume recording, take pictures, turn on the flashlight during recording, and rotate the camera. Front end without stopping your video, which is handy. You have all you need for versatile recording. Tap the screen to adjust focus or exposure. Before recording, use the exposure compensation button and load color filters, though not supported in 4K. Here, you also have a beauty mode for skin blurring, but it's not supported in 4K. The bokeh effect, which we'll see soon, is also not in 4K. You can use the shot steady function for better stabilization, super macro video, night mode for interesting videos, and a teleprompter, which is unique to Xiaomi devices. For creators, it's useful to write and read scripts. You can adjust text size and scrolling speed. Even though it is not intelligent enough to comprehend what you are saying and automatically adjust the script, it is still quite impressive. In addition, when we switch to Pro mode, we can access the video recording section. You will notice an audio monitor appears here, and there is also a button available to adjust the recording volume. Additionally, I will show you the color filters. We can record video in log, even in 4K at 60 FPS with any camera, not just the main one. Moreover, you have the option to load some LUTs right here to directly apply your desired color profile to the video recording. Additionally, you have control over adjusting the exposure compensation, the shutter speed, and the ISO, which can go up to as high as 12,800, alongside managing the white balance and focus settings. Actually, while recording, you have the flexibility to modify these parameters like focus and white balance, allowing you to customize the settings entirely to your preference. As you will notice, it is very well complemented with software. Here is a short demonstration of the 8K recording, which primarily serves the purpose of allowing zooming in during post-production while keeping the camera positioned correctly. But still a good level of detail. It's not something you'll use on a daily basis, but it works. Now you're seeing the result in 4K at 60 frames per second. To start with the ultra-wide camera, which I find captures the colors naturally. They're not as saturated, which I like. It looks good. Interestingly, by switching to the 1x lens, you will see more saturation, a bit less natural than I personally would prefer, but it will really depend somewhat on your personal taste. The truth of the matter is that it is quite remarkable, and if you do not, the digital zoom allows us to make the dynamic change between all these lenses, recording in 4K at 60 frames per second, and I like that even when zooming in at 2x. The main camera, which is digital, is able to maintain a good image quality, although at 3x, for example, you begin to notice that we are talking about a digital zoom, since the jump to 5x is a bit far, so it will be important that you control the intermediate zoom well if you want to maintain the best image quality. Notice that at 5x we clearly regain excellent detail and it looks great. I appreciate that all recordings are compatible with 4K at 60 frames per second without needing to cut when switching lenses. That's a big plus. The telephoto lens capture slightly more natural tones. Let's say the main camera can sometimes oversaturate the results. Notice that we have 18x as the maximum digital zoom, and it looks quite good. It still maintains good detail even though you can tell it's digital zoom. However, it really competes very well during the daytime. Now, take a look at the backlighting. I think it also performs well enough, though you might notice slight chromatic aberration. But it doesn't do too badly, as it controls that aspect well and also achieves a good balance between light and shadow. Even if it fails to detect a face present, there are no aggressive jumps in exposure. Notice that moving closer to the camera it still has. The main camera is going to do an excellent job of that too, so yes, the main camera will definitely perform very well in that regard. We really can't find any faults with it. It looks quite impressive. Additionally, the telephoto camera is also expected to perform admirably in such backlit situations. However, it might create a bit more noise in the darker areas due to its slightly tighter aperture, but overall, it still does a reasonably good job. Interestingly, the device allows us to record with HDR. But even if you activate it, if you record with the ultra-wide camera, for example, it will record without HDR, but in normal format. The same will happen with the telephoto camera. It will record without HDR even if you have enabled HDR. But the main camera is the one that will record in this format that you can only view on compatible monitors, so you are watching a conversion. As I narrate this to you, yes, I am viewing the video on a compatible monitor, and the truth is it looks fine. It will just give much more intensity to the brighter areas, but without the HDR mode, it already does an excellent job in these types of backlit scenarios. However, at night, you do notice that the ultra-wide camera is mid-range. Note that it struggles a lot with noise, which is almost completely eliminated when you switch to the main camera. Therefore, it serves as a comprehensive demonstration showing that the ultra-wide camera on this device is quite basic and lacks advanced features. In darker areas, it really won't expose correctly, leading to a lot of visible noise. The main camera does show improvement, although I wouldn't say it's particularly spectacular. I anticipated something superior considering the excellent performance it demonstrated in photography. It appears that in low light conditions, the main camera might also face challenges. Therefore, it's simply advisable to record in areas that are well lit to achieve better results. The telephoto camera will face difficulties in these kinds of scenarios, particularly because of its f3.0 aperture. You'll notice there's a significant amount of noise, but honestly, it still performs exceptionally well when you consider the hardware level it possesses. In this case, the processor plays a crucial role. It's extremely powerful and aids significantly in reducing noise and enhancing performance. But here in the night recording, again it is confirmed that it is not yet a fully flagship device. Now watch with the ultra-wide camera, without any stabilization mode enabled, is doing quite well. When you're walking, if you're running with much more dynamic scenes, if you can get a little bit more pronounced movements, although what struck me about this clip is that the white balance got a little shaky. Now, turning on shot steady mode reduces the video quality to 2.8K, which is still good considering it's going to apply superior stabilization. When walking, there is not so much difference, but when running, I think there is a good difference in the control of these movements, so it is recommended to use it and record well these kind of scenes with more action. Here you have, for example, the video now with the main camera in 4K, 60 frames per second. When walking, I think it controls the movements well. When you're running, you do start to notice them more intensely, so you might want to apply the additional stabilization. Finally, here you are looking at the telephoto camera. Obviously, it's going to generate much more movement. That's because of physical and natural issues, but even so, the stabilization seems to me to have worked well, obviously for subtle movements. If you are using a telephoto camera while running, it is quite clear that the outcome will show a significant amount of movement. Now, regarding the zoom feature, take into account whether it will transition smoothly. I appreciate how it effectively adjusts the level of detail. When discussing digital zoom at intermediate levels, it appears quite good. I appreciated this aspect. However, the transition is indeed significant from 1 to 5 times zoom. Therefore, if you wish to maintain quality, it is crucial to directly jump to 5 times zoom. The focus isn't ultra fast, but it's accurate, so it works well. The main camera, the telephoto camera, already told you that it will focus at a distance a little further away. And the portrait recording mode, the truth is that it is basic, it is not in 4K, and that subtracts many points. And if there is more movement, note that it will also have some. Inaccuracies in edge detection make it appear somewhat artificial, yet it remains applied even when it fails to detect a face in the frame. The intensity decreases when the person is distant and increases when they are close, affecting the behavior. Is positive. It can keep some foreground objects in focus, which is good. However, not being a 4K video loses points. But the performance. Generally, if positive, interestingly, it allows us to use the periscope lens in portrait mode recording, offering a more professional telephoto view. It applies a blur effect, though not in 4K, so it appears more basic than preferred. However, the performance is quite good. Now, observe how the blur looks in full. Naturally, using the periscope lens, even without any portrait mode or similar effects, it already creates a particular blur effect in the background. This effect gives the result a natural appearance. Clearly, as we move closer to the camera, this effect will naturally intensify, which looks quite good, even though it doesn't appear as professional as what we observe in pricier devices. I wasn't fond of the fast camera feature on this cell phone because it lacks stabilization, which leads to results that aren't very satisfactory. It's a bit unusual, although in this instance you initially observe 15x, which is the standard setting. However, something I appreciate is that you have the option to reduce it to 4x, a feature not all devices offer. I believe that for capturing people's movements, 4x provides a more pleasant effect. Nevertheless, since it lacks stabilization, it loses some points, making the slow motion result appear less appealing. You have the option of HD or Full HD at 120 frames per second. The file records at 120 frames per second, allowing you to select the portion to slow down during post-production at any moment. This is a really beneficial feature. Additionally, you can increase the rate to 240 frames per second with the file still recorded at that same rate, and this is also available in Full HD. In this regard, it can truly distinguish itself from other alternatives. It allows us to reach 480 or 960 frames per second in Full HD. However, the downside is that the file is recorded at 30 frames per second and doesn't return to normal speed at the end. This continues to be a critique I have of the device's software. Interestingly, it also lets us go up to 1920 frames per second, but only in HD, which significantly reduces the level of detail. However, if you are interested in experiencing ultra slow motion, I believe you might find it enjoyable here, even though it may not be as sharp. The front-facing camera is once again clearly not high-end. It tends to overexpose some of the results, particularly in this instance. When wearing a cap, it already begins to create backlighting, and in more specific backlighting situations, it will further burn the background. Additionally, it lacks autofocus capabilities. That would indeed be another criticism, yet I must emphasize that the dynamic range of this camera is truly very limited. Even though the stabilization is quite good, the presence of numerous overexposed and burned areas during recording significantly reduces its overall appeal. Furthermore, when capturing footage at night, it will exhibit a considerable amount of noise, which causes this device to resemble more of a low-end product rather than one in its intended price category. The truth is that it suffers significantly if you need to be in front of a light source for a positive result, because without it, the appearance will be really very poor. When you remain quite static, it can somewhat reduce and handle the noise, but generally, it ends up being a really low-quality video. This is clearly its weakest aspect, much like many other devices from this manufacturer. Here at the front, we can use the bokeh effect to blur the background in full HD, as I mentioned, with the same dynamic range issues. Bokeh mode, well, it can really assist you in creating a pleasant scene since it can somewhat focus on the objects in the foreground. Although this may vary, you can see that it is capable in certain specific situations. Unlike other devices that might blur everything except your body, the result can appear more natural and nice, especially in terms of depth detection, but lower quality in colors, lighting, etc. Up front, as fast motion like the back, slow motion is also available, but only in HD at 120 FPS, and the file records at this rate. It's basic slow motion. Within the software, we will encounter Android 16 and HyperOS 3 version 0.40. This is accurate at the time of recording this video. Interestingly, during the unboxing, HyperOS 3 was not present, which is rather unusual. I am unsure if this update has been released. From Hyper 2 to 3. The promise is that there will be 4 years of software updates and 6 years of security patches. However, I must emphasize that due to its release date, I'm uncertain if this update has already used up the first year of updates. Year that is yet to be seen. The truth is, it has update policies that match its competitive price. The software experience is refined, not a total evolution or drastic change, but it's appreciated. The colors in general appear somewhat different, with animations that are noticeably more fluid and better crafted. While there aren't a lot of new features, it's important to note that the update does come with some enhancements. With a new customization kit, much like the iPhone, allowing you to create new sets. It provides default templates for a similar aesthetic. Notice how the backgrounds can detect depth, for instance, placing the clock behind. Overall, this aspect of customization is quite impressive. In the past, we had something that was somewhat similar to this. However, the new feature here is that you can, let's say, already have it set up in advance. The sets that are created here can be changed with just a single tap, much like how it functions on the iPhone. Also, take note that the transition from the always-on display to the lock screen is quite smooth and appealing. In this particular instance, the depth effect wasn't detected since it's not an image I personally selected. However, we do observe that identical blurred background effect on the home screen section, which is something new and interesting. It counts. With its store of themes, where you can customize to the extreme your device. This is likely the most customizable operating system regarding themes available in the stores because it doesn't. They not only modify the background and icons, but they also have the capability to alter various elements like lock screen widgets, the style and appearance of the lock screen, among many other features. It is important to note that here we have the option to download specific widgets tailored for our personal custom screen, which will incorporate the system applications. However, if you prefer, you can choose to download these kinds of widgets. The truth is that there are no manufacturers that offer you this level of customization for special widgets that you can download. Additionally, you can certainly download wallpapers and even ringtones, which is quite interesting, along with fonts. Therefore, I emphasize that customization options are extensive. In fact, when it comes to wallpapers, you'll notice that we also have super wallpapers available. If you're not familiar with them, they're a fascinating implementation by Xiaomi, as they will also display. A smooth and seamless transition occurs between the lock screen followed by the always-on faceplate and ultimately leading to the home screen. Watch this level of transitions you could enjoy on your device, just apply it. And now, notice how when locking the cell phone, we have a super nice transition. When unlocking it or entering the lock screen, there is another transition. And when accessing, another transition, giving a feeling of seamless integration. And well, in this case, the always on display mode really is always on display. Yes, you can keep the screen on all the time. By default, it stays on for 10 seconds after turning off, but you can choose a schedule or smart behavior. Obviously, the features, you have the option to extract them from the themes you can install, or alternatively, you can create your own unique signatures. You can also choose from a gallery that includes analog, digital, or kaleidoscope effect watches, along with several other dials. In fact, you even have the ability to add your own custom image, insert text, and choose which indicators you prefer it to display. This means that the customization of the dial is quite advanced, and it offers a lot of possibilities. Always on also keeps the effects present in the illumination of the edges when receiving notifications, ensuring they remain visible and noticeable. A notification. We have the well-known carousel of backgrounds, which I really dislike, but anyway, you can enjoy it there. Also note that for the home screen, it comes with this one by default. The truth is that it's quite ugly due to the animation. Notice that when you slide, it appears as if the applications just pop out and suddenly, without any animation, suggestions appear. I appreciate the suggestions and tools, but I dislike the lack of animation. You'll also notice it displays ads in this, but then it's something I don't personally enjoy, but you can go into settings to disable that option. Actually, you can also group icons by color and show animations when switching between apps. It's interesting how they've set up this section. You can disable the search bar quickly to open the app drawer, allowing for a slightly more fluid behavior. Notice that it is also divided into different categories, providing an additional level of organization if desired. For the home screen, here we can enjoy effects like background blur or choose different transition effects between pages and even disable text for a smoother display. The icons look cleaner. We will additionally discover a few activation gestures, such as using the voice assistant to take a screenshot by sliding 3 fingers downward. It's important to note that this feature also supports scroll capture, which has been available for several generations and thankfully remains accessible. Moreover, you will find various brushes for making annotations or for censoring completely personal content. You could also take a partial screenshot if you hold 3 fingers on top of the screen, then draw the shape you want to capture, and you could turn on the flashlight by double tapping the power button, but that would replace the gesture to open the camera, so you have to decide. Interestingly, you also have the back tap option, which can be activated with both 2 and 3 taps. Notice how it allows you to open the assistant, activate the calculator or the camera, and enable silent mode or even a special accessibility mode, among other tools. However, curiously, it doesn't permit us to open a specific application. But well, let's give it a try with the back touch to open the control center. Now watch closely as I'm going to give 2 taps, and at this point, if it successfully opened that control center, then it can indeed be helpful for certain applications. Let's now, for example, to say take a screenshot with 3 touches. We tried 1, 2, 3, and yes, it worked fine. Traditional Xiaomi, we have the floating ball that we already know, which will give us access to a menu that we have over here pop up to be able to configure it. Although we also have here available the option of scrolls directly on that floating ball to create other types of actions and interactions. We additionally have the one-handed use mode, which unfortunately remains in this very complex activation format and only descends halfway down the screen, meaning that there are still elements you can't reach. Personally, I don't like this at all. Interestingly, it also includes an option to clean the speaker. Similar to what we observe in smartwatches, in this instance, it would remove both dust and water by emitting a loud sound. We are going to listen to it in a straightforward manner just so you have it as a reference point to consider. The reality is that it is actually quite loud and it also produces vibration. In order to clean those speakers and ensure you always have the best possible sound quality, this system is equipped with the Flow application tools. Along with this side toolbox, you'll see that by clicking once, we can open these apps in a floating window mode. These windows are resizable and can be positioned wherever we desire. It observes that in this case, if it allows us to open more than one application at the same time, but the limit is simply in 2. By combining it with the back view, you can have up to 4 apps open simultaneously. The sidebar allows us to open apps in split screen mode. Simply select the desired app and there you go. 4 apps running at once. You can minimize them by moving them to the edge, which is great because it resizes the content. I must say, It doesn't allow you to alter the application's shape, like making it more square, as it maintains the same proportion. However, I appreciate that it resizes the internal content, ensuring you can use it without issues. I love their implementation. This sidebar will be useful while playing games, as we'll see later, and also during video apps or calls. Note that you can manage which apps appear in the sidebar options. For instance, if you're on TikTok, you'll find options not only for app access but also for screen recording. You can capture screenshots, project wirelessly, and even enable subtitles using AI. You can also change the color style of your screen. Additionally, you have the option to enable or disable Dolby Atmos, which interestingly is available here, even though I thought it came with both sound. However, there are still some inconsistencies. Furthermore, you have the surround sound options available here. Finally, seems to be a visual effects option gives fluid movement. A bit more fluidity in the movements you're seeing on the screen during a call. Notice that the sidebar also offers options like noise reduction, the AI interpreter and captioning feature, and if you enable your camera, it also gives you the option of fill light, which allows you to have a little bit more illumination when you are in a very dark environment. Or we're also going to discover over here the reactions. Notice how, for instance, I can simply display a gesture like this, and it will activate some fascinating animation right at the moment of, to make your calls compatible. Using these kinds of applications, you can even choose cameras from other devices. If you have additional Xiaomi phones, you can connect those cameras wirelessly to your video call, making it quite fascinating. Interestingly, the manufacturer keeps the heart rate reader, which in this case will be through the flash. Because it has an ultrasonic fingerprint reader instead of an optical one, you should place your finger right here, close to the flash and the camera. To give it a try. It can measure heart rate, though not very accurately. I'll check if it works eventually. It's quite complex. Sometimes it measures for a few seconds, other times it doesn't. Honestly, I wouldn't recommend using it, but it is available. In addition, we have an active visual perception mode designed to detect when you're looking at the screen, allowing it to stay on and even activate the always on mode in smart mode. Furthermore, if you were uncertain, the work mode operates by connecting to a business account. It's not exactly a mode dedicated solely to traditional users, but rather one that functions specifically through partnerships with businesses. So, as you will observe, the operating system is indeed quite similar to HyperOS 2. However, in theory, it includes deep optimizations that are designed to make it more agile, more responsive, and generally more stable. Ideally, it won't have as many bugs, although Xiaomi has never been a brand particularly known for its highly polished software. Let's now discuss artificial intelligence. I have a video available that details all the features of the Xiaomi Hyper AI suite, and I've linked it here for you to watch. In the latest version of HyperOS, there are some new AI features. Besides what's in the video, there's a section with AI-generated dynamic wallpapers. In this step, all we need to do is choose an image that we like. For example, I will select this particular one featuring a night scene in nature. It may take just a few seconds to analyze the photo. I must give it permission to use the image and apply a crop, especially if there is a watermark or any similar feature. Finally, I will press the generate button. It indicates that the server is currently busy, so this process might take up to a minute as it relies on an internet connection to operate. Then, let's wait and see what the final result will be. Here, you can notice how Xiaomi hasn't yet achieved a highly perfected job in the realm of artificial intelligence. They still depend on external providers, because the internal processor this device possesses is incredibly powerful. It seems to me that it would indeed have the capabilities to run artificial intelligence directly on the device itself. However, they choose to utilize cloud services instead. As you can see, it's still in progress, so it might take longer than expected. It's finally done. Curiously, it skipped the preview and went straight to the option to apply the background. I'll apply it to both and see how it turned an image into a short video, which looks perfect for the wallpaper. That's what this feature does. As I mentioned, it retains other functions already in its suite, such as the writing tool. That lets us press and hold in any text field to access this option connected to the Notes app. Now there's a new feature allowing specific instructions when writing text, and you can even enable deep thinking. Let's see if it works in Spanish. It composes a formal loan request for 5 pesos to purchase a soft drink, and we will examine what is currently being generated. At this moment, it is producing a small skeleton with various fields to complete, as I instructed it to be a formal request. Notice that it provides us with quite a comprehensive piece that we can easily copy and insert right here, and we're done. So the fact that all of this is already directly integrated into this section of the text fields, in my opinion, makes the process of writing significantly easier. Note that the text fields have editable frequent phrases. You typically respond to messages using a consistent format. This could significantly boost your productivity. This is a feature I haven't encountered in other devices until now. In the gallery, we also have some exciting new editing options powered by artificial intelligence. For instance, there's the Ultra HD option that enhances the definition of certain photos or objects using AI. While it's not a miracle worker, it certainly provides an improved experience. Basic, we now have AI beauty mode, allowing face enhancement with one selector. In the Create section, options like image expansion, object eraser, sky change, and bokeh effect remain. We have many tools. The eraser even has a delete ref option. It comes complete with voice recognition in the recorder to transcribe, identify speakers, summarize, and translate recordings or conversations. However, all these functions need an internet connection. Even introduces a search function with AI. This feature, in theory, will search within system applications, files, and documents. If you have linked your computer with Windows links, it could also search in that category. Regarding Google functions, it includes Circle to search and also Gemini. Therefore, you have everything necessary for a very comprehensive experience in artificial intelligence. Let's now discuss security. In this instance, we have an ultrasonic fingerprint reader. It's incredibly fast, supporting up to a maximum of 5 records, making it very comprehensive. Notice how quick it operates. Simply place your finger on it, remove it, and that's it. It's interesting to note that there are various animations available for you to select from, even in this situation with different categories. Some are minimalist, which just the animations display in grayscale or neon, available for download. If you want to add more versatility to this unlock using various styles, additionally, it has shortcuts here, though they're less useful since you can customize them. However, you can access search, a QR code scanner, or add a calendar event. Ideally, customizing these shortcuts would be best, but that's not possible. There's also facial unlocking, but it's only 2-dimensional. It's actually not a very secure way to unlock, and in fact the device itself will give you those kinds of warnings. And it also integrates smart unlock with Xiaomi Bluetooth devices, so if you have a Xiaomi watch or bracelet and you have it paired, as long as they are connected, the device can stay unlocked. But one aspect I really do not appreciate is that this particular feature entirely disregards the Smart Unlock option that Google includes in the majority of Android devices. Google's Smart Unlock is actually superior because it not only lets you connect Bluetooth devices to remain unlocked, but it also allows you to add trusted locations, among other things. This device will not have this available, which is quite curious because it involves unlocking. Extended lock that is included in all Android except Xiaomi. Note, the file manager has a secure hidden folder. Swipe down to access it using a pattern or fingerprint. Store confidential files or folders here with different view styles. The device also lets us set up a second space so that using one unlock pattern, you can access a cell phone, and with a different unlock pattern, you can essentially access a separate cell phone within the same device. This means each space has its own set of applications, accounts, and files, which is perfect for keeping work and personal life distinct and separate. And here, you can also return quickly to the main mode if you want to switch back and forth between spaces. Within the security application itself, we are going to discover additional tools. Notice that once again, we encounter a bit of instability, but nonetheless, here we will also find the application lock feature. This allows you, for instance, to set up a requirement for your fingerprint or a specific code before granting you access to certain applications. You can hide or clone apps to use 2 accounts on the same phone. They suggest social apps, but any app can be enabled, which is always handy. It lacks a child mode or its own VPN, but as you saw, it includes a type of antivirus, though not clearly tied to any cybersecurity firm. Being an Android includes all Google features for Android devices, except the extended unlock that replies to you a moment ago. However, if you have Google Play Protect, you have the option to configure applications, among other features such as Google's anti-theft protection. In fact, it also includes the option to locate your device using Google's implementation. But here, in the Xiaomi account settings, you will also find Xiaomi Cloud options to locate your device. These options are disabled by default, so it is crucial to enable them if you want to increase your chances of finding your phone in case of some loss. You enable these options as they allow you to send messages, access the location, and even more features. I like that in this case, you are not only relying on Google's own implementation, but Xiaomi also has its own tool. Let's proceed to discuss the battery. Its capacity is 6,500 milliamp hours. This is a considerably large battery, significantly larger than the previous generation. However, during my testing, it didn't perform as well as expected. When we tried to discharge the device as quickly as possible, it lasted for 3 hours and 48 minutes. This means if you're planning to run power-intensive tasks that require a lot of energy, the device indeed boasts substantial power. So, it will be capable of performing tasks extremely fast, but it will also rapidly deplete the battery. In this situation, it couldn't surpass the 4-hour mark, which is a minimum standard we would expect most devices to meet. By keeping that battery draining app running in the background and simultaneously playing videos in the foreground, it managed to reach 6 hours and 44 minutes. This demonstrates that it somehow manages to allocate power a bit more efficiently to the apps running in the background. But interestingly enough, last generation had reached a total of 8 hours and 12 minutes, so it appears that Hyperos 3 is not yet fully adapted, and it is not quite smart enough to provide minimal power to the applications running in the background. In my test, when playing YouTube videos with the screen set at 50% brightness, after 7 hours, it still had 28% left. After 21 hours, it still had 6% left. And finally, it shut down after 21 hours and 35 minutes. In this regard, it indeed became quite remarkable. To illustrate, the identical test conducted on the previous generation provided us with a battery life of 16 hours and 56 minutes. Thus, we observed a significant improvement in battery performance. However, as I frequently mention, the battery life you experience depends greatly on your daily activities. For this reason, I'm conducting these reference tests just to give you an idea, but clearly, each user engages with different features on their cell phone, which means the battery life could vary significantly. All this device does is it actually has a much larger battery compared to the average. If you happen to be among the most demanding users, you might find yourself needing to use the saver mode that's available, or even the ultra saver mode, which is also available, particularly in emergency situations. Nevertheless, one aspect that is certainly not ideal is that the charger isn't included in the box. It does support charging at 100 watts. The previous generation supported charging at 120 watts, making this change quite intriguing. But obviously, having a larger battery, perhaps because of the density of the battery, does not support such an extreme load. In my test, after 15 minutes, it reached 34%. After 30 minutes, it reached 60%, and the full charge completed in 1 hour and 10 minutes. Here, there is going to be a... This difference is quite significant because the previous generation charged at a much faster rate. If you take a look at the graph, you'll notice that during the initial peak, it reaches a power level that is very close to the charger's maximum limit. Then, of course, to protect the battery's health, the charging power is significantly reduced, allowing the battery to be charged at a much lower power level. The durability of the battery will decrease significantly, and in fact, during the final stage, it will operate at a much slower power level. It also includes a full speed charging mode that does increase the power, so in my test having this mode activated, with 15 minutes it reached 39%, in 30 minutes 68%. The complete charging process took 68 minutes. While this is still somewhat lengthy from 0 to 100%, at least during the initial stage of charging, it could have been faster. You can observe that when using higher power, if you examine the graph, it charges more quickly, at least for the initial 40 minutes or so. And then if you switch to a very low power to maintain the battery's durability, then I believe that 40 minutes of charging will be sufficient to already achieve a very good battery life. It also offers wireless charging capabilities, supporting up to 50 watts. However, this requires a compatible charger, as most wireless chargers are not designed to handle 50 watts. Therefore, it's important to find a specific charger that supports this protocol. Additionally, it features reverse wireless charging, which undoubtedly enhances the high-end experience. This allows you to charge accessories on the back of your phone, or even help out friends whose phones have run out of battery, as long as their devices support wireless charging. To ensure the battery's durability, it includes a smart charging feature. This allows the device to charge at a slower rate during the night after learning your routine. Additionally, there's a charging lock option, which prevents it from charging all the way to 100%. This is especially ideal if you need to keep it plugged in constantly. For instance, those who drive for Uber or similar services often keep their devices connected. For such users, this charging lock option can be incredibly beneficial. Now let's discuss connectivity. In this regard, allow me to begin by informing you that it features a chip that Xiaomi has designed in-house. This chip is known as the Surge T1S as well as the T1 Plus. These particular chips are specifically engineered to enhance and optimize Wi-Fi signals. Bluetooth, GPS, and cellular provide us with seamless, smarter connectivity. It's interesting there's no clear way to test it, but we never noticed any drawbacks downloading information, games, etc., so the experience feels complete. In fact, it supports 5G and Wi-Fi 7, so you have the highest download speeds currently available. Includes a data lock mode to stop specific apps from using mobile data, only allowing Wi-Fi as you choose. It supports Bluetooth 6, featuring the latest tech and comes with NFC for mobile payments. It also supports OTG for USB-C accessories, though it's soft by default and must be enabled in the app. When you are ready and want to use it, it supports wireless screen projection in mirrored mode or more advanced ways, like projecting with a minimized window to use the phone for other tasks, or with the screen off to save battery, and hiding notifications and private items during the projection. In fact, this generation additionally supports wired projection in a mirrored mode, which wasn't supported by the last generation. I believe this is a significant addition for gamers. With this feature, you can connect a larger screen with much lower latency compared to what we experience in wireless projection. This allows for a better gaming experience. However, it doesn't offer a desktop mode on wireless projection or anything similar, but I do appreciate the small advancements it's making. Of course, it also supports Android Auto, and in terms of sensors, it comes with accelerometers, geomagnetic field sensor, orientation sensor, the gyroscope, the light sensor, and the physical proximity sensor are included, which I find amazing because these are features where budgets are often cut. Additionally, it has an infrared sensor to control the TV or air conditioning. Although it is positioned at the back, which might seem a bit odd, it functions effectively with its own My Remote application. The connectivity block is very complete. Let's briefly discuss the Xiaomi ecosystem. As Poco is a Xiaomi brand, all Xiaomi products, including the Xiaomi Pad, can connect to this phone. A smartband, smartwatch, the Xiaomi Buds, even Poco already has some other accessory out there, also the Redmi brand, and in this case it seems to me that they have greatly improved all their products. Connectivity tech? In this HyperOS 3 version, a new feature lets us interact with iPad and Mac, enhancing device coexistence. In fact, Xiaomi provides a detailed explanation of the interconnectivity feature within its own settings. It demonstrates how, for instance, we can use the cell phone through our tablet, share clipboards, and even connect with the computer. The device includes the Windows Link function pre-installed, simplifying the process of connecting it with your Windows computer, even if it's not a Xiaomi brand. This is particularly useful because although Xiaomi does manufacture laptops, they are not widely available in this part of the world. On that side, the ecosystem is really quite complete. I really liked it a lot because you can even synchronize calls and notifications, allowing all your devices to alert you that something is happening. I think this is very good. However, even better is what Xiaomi has accomplished in this area. With the generation of HyperOS 3, they have disrupted the Apple ecosystem, much like what other brands are attempting. However, in my opinion, Xiaomi is more advanced and has impressed me the most in this area. For instance, when you begin by installing the Xiaomi Interconnectivity app on an iPhone, you can easily send photos and videos from an iPhone to a Xiaomi device or the other way around, and the connection is established very quickly. Oppo, Honor, and others have tried this, and the fingerprint reader is a good feature, but sometimes it makes an error and you have to try again, or it takes a while to make the connection. In this case, it is the fastest connection I've seen. You press and immediately appears the notice on the iPhone that someone is trying to send a picture. Then I think it's very good. The transfer is also fast. Yes, you must have the application open on the iPhone for this to work, but I think it's a good thing. And not only that, but also the Xiaomi Interconnectivity app can be installed on both iPad and Mac. This means you could project your cell phone screen onto a Mac and fully utilize the cell phone's capabilities. You can even send and receive files with ease. Moreover, you have the option to locate the device if it gets lost, as they remain linked. Furthermore, we're going to have the capability to unlock the phone directly using the Mac's fingerprint reader. It appears to me that they have successfully managed to achieve a smooth integration with the Apple ecosystem. This effectively invites Mac users to finally consider making the switch to this device, because there is no longer that pretext that with AirDrop everything is easier. Well, now also with Xiaomi Share, you could send and receive files to these devices without too much complication. It seems to me something very positive. And obviously it also integrates Android and Google's own technologies like QuickShare, Google FastPaid for fast device pairing. And where it would be a bit lacking would be in its own technologies, because yes, it comes with Xiaomi Cloud, but it only offers you 5 gigabytes and doesn't even let you upload files, but only backups of the device and its settings. But you can't have your own cloud of photos there or anything like that. In that sense, it depends on Google. In fact, Xiaomi's own gallery is linked to Google Photos in case you want to make your backup response there. So we might rely more on Google Drive and Photos. But for smart homes, Xiaomi is beneficial. It includes Xiaomi Home linking many brand devices or even some from collaborating brands. You can build your smart ecosystem with it. Let's test the performance of the POCO F8 Ultra 8, which arrives with the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5, a two-powerful processor, 12 GB of RAM LPDDR4X, and we are going to find 256 GB of storage in the most basic configuration, with additional 8 GB created in some strange way by Xiaomi. We are talking about UFS 4.1 storage without the possibility of putting microSD, and that's it. It took 1 dead seconds on average to open each application. To me, in this way, yes, we are indeed going to observe that the operating system didn't provide much assistance because this very same processor has become faster in other devices that appear to be more optimized in their software. This is evident because when opening the applications, I noticed 1 or 2 stumbles. However, now that the applications are open, let's take a moment to check, for instance, if we could swap between them in this super fast manner, and note that here, we already observed that some applications had to be reopened. This shows us, I think, that it is not so well optimized. Look, there we saw another white screen. It seems that it is not the best device in this aspect. Again, we see white screens, unbelievable. Seeing this level of specifications, we expected a better performance here at the time of having all these applications open. Definitely that has not left us satisfied. There you yourself are seeing it again, applications that are restarted. Definitely the experience has not been so good in this case, I think, due to poor optimization of the operating system, because I insist that the level of technical specifications, we expected something brutal. Now observe, for example, how it behaves here on Facebook. We are scrolling quickly and it seems that it has no hindrances or anything like that. In that sense, it behaves well. We are going to change Instagram just so you can see for yourself more or less how it behaves. You can see in this case, it seems to be taking a while to load more content, but well, that may depend on that too. My internet connection, it doesn't appear to be very fast here at the moment, and in fact, I'm sensing a warming up. Somewhat unusual now that I'm trying to demand a bit, but come on, these aren't extraordinary tasks. It's not like I'm exporting a video or gaming and I already feel the device is hotter than it should be. So it seems that the operating system is the one that does not help so much to have such a smooth experience and without heating, because the truth is that here it has impressed me that I feel it warmer than it should be. But well, let's go now to another application, but for example, so that you can see more or less. We didn't expect scrolling to be stuck. We'll switch apps just to test. More or less how the scrolling is around here. Let's take a look. There we are with another one, just one more. And well, there it is on the storage. I was already anticipating you that there are several versions. In this case, I have the 256 GB, and curiously it gives us another 8 GB, which, as I told you, I have no idea where Xiaomi gets it from, but somehow it has managed it. Notice that it comes with tools to deep clean the system, giving you different suggestions, for example, installation packages, videos. Also here it shows you. It also gives us a general idea of the videos you have, but it doesn't indicate their size here, which I believe would be quite helpful. Here it provides suggestions for uninstalling apps, and it also displays which apps and games are taking up the most space on our device. Additionally, it presents data from specific applications. Or photos. In fact, when analyzing photos, it can identify duplicate images or those that seem to be taken by accident. I really appreciate these filters because they significantly simplify the process of cleaning up our device. Finally, note that it also comes with WhatsApp and Facebook Cleaner, which could also come to help free up some space at some point for the more technical ones. Let's go ahead and do a storage test. Although in this case, observe. It is already giving me the warning that I do not have so much free space. It is that today's games are too heavy, but as we already tested the games, let me eliminate one so that this device does not play at such a disadvantage in the test of the storage reading. And that's it. Let's test it. There is no longer telling me that it's low on space, so we run the test and see in red it reached 35,50,529 megabytes per second, in right 40,119 megabytes per second. It's a very fast storage. Even when it came to the RAM memory, it reached very high numbers, 1560.3 and 1140.9 megabytes per second in reading and writing, respectively. It's evident that the hardware is very powerful, yet the performance isn't as smooth. This might be due to the operating system needing more optimization, even though in HyperOS, one of its primary objectives was optimization. Alright, let's proceed to another test, which is exporting this video. Keep in mind that for the price, we're dealing with a 4K video. We're using clips recorded with this cell phone, and when placed consecutively, they total 1 minute. It took 19 seconds. It's not terrible, but honestly, with this processor, RAM, and all the specifications, I anticipated something more powerful. I have a feeling that adding this tremendous rear speaker has greatly benefited the sound quality. However, it's negatively affecting the cooling system. The phone feels hotter than usual after performing these tests, and obviously having a hotter device makes it more difficult for the processor to consistently maintain high performance. So I suspect this might be the main issue. Just observe how things are. It gives us an incredible sound experience, but simultaneously it causes us some issues. Now, let's dive into the topic of the games. This device features an app known as Game Center. It's primarily filled with basic games, the simple kind that you can easily run to entertain yourself. At some point, you might find a few with multiplayer options. However, generally speaking, these games are not designed to be complex or anything along those lines. Interestingly enough, if we have also here another application which is called Game Turbo, which is hidden in the security application, that remains that inconsistent even in Hyperos 3. And then it's referred to as Game Space, which is something they still have not addressed. So over here, you have the ability to review all the contents that you have installed. Additionally, we're going to be able to access the settings within Game Space here, which allows us to check if Game Turbo is available. It also displays some other basic information like performance optimization in case you want certain apps to refrain from wiping RAM during gameplay. Moreover, you can enable a Do Not Disturb mode if you wish. The truth is that this configuration doesn't offer very advanced options, but we can select a high performance profile or an energy saving one, depending on what you want to prioritize when running your content. Now, we're going to open a game so you can observe how on the left side this sidebar opens, showing us the Wild Boost mode activated at that moment. It shows the FPS counter. Here is the shortcut bar for floating apps, and note the button to return to our game catalog, which closes the open game. Then we have performance settings, which enables us to choose between prioritizing the frame rate or the image quality or simply maintaining a balanced profile. It's important to note that we also have the capability to optimize the screen's touch response to enhance gameplay. Additionally, there is a section dedicated to enhanced visual effects. This section can provide us with options such as increased resolution for our video or a smart frame rate that attempts to interpolate frames, resulting in a smoother and more fluid experience. We also have here some visual styles that will activate a different colorization of the screen during gameplay. Additionally, we will notice an increase in the Wi-Fi speed to optimize latency in these games. This is related to performance. However, it is important to note that we will also discover around here button to clear memory with one tap button to change our game chat voices include girl, woman, cartoon, robot or man. Finally, we'll also have access to floating timers for arena games and a do not disturb button, plus the basics like taking screenshots, screen recordings and more. Access the final settings. Additionally, we have the button to project the screen wirelessly and there's network optimization. You can enable or disable the brightness in this section, allowing for a comfortable and quick control. Furthermore, you can change the style of notifications. Notice that by default they appear in this manner, and you can slide them down to respond quickly. However, if you choose to enable this option, it will appear with a visual strip that runs across this part of the screen to prevent interruptions from the game, as even touching them doesn't trigger any interaction. As you come to realize, the tools also arrive somewhat renewed in this version of Hyperos. However, it does not yet include additional functions such as mapping the buttons, creating macros, and other features that we are beginning to see from other manufacturers. Considering that this is a brand that focuses heavily on high performance, gaming, and more, I think it is lagging a bit behind in this aspect. But before we proceed to see, regarding the results of our tests, I want to tell you that this device, in addition to the Snapdragon processor, also integrates a chip known as Vision Boost D, focused on enhancing graphics using AI models that have been trained to increase image detail and provide more sophisticated graphics. In this context, this chip is used for the frame interpolation I demonstrated earlier, which can be enabled to make movements appear smoother. The previous generation had a chip, but this one is the new generation, capable of handling up to 120 frames per second, enhancing the resolution, detail level, HDR effects, and more for content not typically supported. In fact, it also incorporates a cooling layer known as Ice Loop D. Dual channel with 6,700 square millimeters, interestingly a larger vapor chamber than the generation. I mentioned that it was 5,400 square millimeters. Therefore, the heating I experienced during the performance test is puzzling, considering it has a larger vapor chamber. Nevertheless, Lidl guarantees that the device includes mechanisms to transfer heat to areas where it won't be uncomfortable to hold. Furthermore, little highlights that it features thermal flow designed to direct the heat away from the grip areas, ensuring it doesn't feel excessively hot in the hand. However, the reality is that I did not notice it being reflected in reality at all. Anyway, let's go to the test. In Call of Duty by default has the very high graphic quality at maximum rate. We can go up to the maximum quality with the maximum frame rate, and if we select the ultra rate, the quality drops to medium level, the same as we have already seen so far in the high end. You can enable all the effects you want. Remember that it is a very powerful processor. And already at the time of playing, the experience seems to me that it was positive. It should be noted that the screen recording is done at 24 frames per second by default, but we raised it to 60 frames per second to see if it was able to record at this level of fluidity, and it seems to me that it has succeeded. We have a good behavior, although when recording the screen is not free of some peaks that if you get to notice a little, but the truth is that it does give us a good gameplay. However, the heating from this point onward begins to frighten us somewhat. It's not too hot yet, but this game isn't the most complex one we usually test. We prioritized the refresh rate and noted that it reached 120 frames per second, which is fluid and stable with good graphics. This provides a very good experience. However, the heating is still a bit higher than we'd like, given the game we're running, reaching 42.2 degrees Celsius on the outside. Then we played Henshin Impact, which is set to high quality by default, and we increased it up to an exceptionally high quality at 60 frames per second, with motion blur also set to a very high quality. Once again, the experience was excellent in terms of performance, averaging 59 frames per second. The lowest peak was 48 frames, which is nothing to be concerned about as it maintains smooth performance. However, the heating is what started to increase even further, reaching 45.5 degrees Celsius, and that is definitely becoming noticeable. Annoying in the hand. Unfortunately, it appears that the manufacturer has not managed things well. Although they mention many aspects focused on heat dissipation in their developments, it is quite curious that this does not seem to translate into real-world performance. We then proceeded to play Car X Street, and it's important to note that we maxed out the configuration settings. Clearly, this is a configuration level that we typically do not use within this price range. Unless they are devices that come equipped with the most recent processor technology or are specifically designed with a strong emphasis on gaming. So let's test how it's doing, and once more we're going to observe that it's performing excellently in terms of the performance experience. It's running very smoothly, very stable, and with extremely high quality graphics. However, once again, the temperature will be an issue. In fact, in this instance, it rose to 47.5 degrees Celsius, clearly indicating that it definitely has some complications when it comes to staying cool. However, interestingly, the performance doesn't decline in these games. This might actually indicate that it effectively extracts heat from the processor, transferring it directly to our hands. Then we played Sendless Sun Zero. Note that we went up to the highest quality in all parameters we could, up to 60 frames per second to put it a completely demanding test. And it is curious because it started at some frames that were not going so high. In fact, its lowest peak was 36. But in the end, if he managed to climb to 60 frames per second, then it seems that here it was already warmer than the account. That had to restrict its performance. We can't say for certain, but what we did observe is the same pattern once more. Excellent graphics details, smooth movements, and in this instance, the temperature hit 46.4 degrees Celsius. Then we proceeded to play Guttering Waves. Remember, we had chosen the graphic quality setting. Higher possible at 60 frames per second. With all additional graphical effects enabled, the experience was much like the previous game. Initially, it did not reach 60 frames per second consistently. There were moments when it achieved this, but it frequently dropped back down. It appears the temperature was too high once more, preventing sustained performance for an extended period. Now here again the temperature reached 46.5 degrees Celsius, quite a lot. Although yes, they are complex games, but we do this same test on other devices and we had not noticed such a high heating as we did notice in this model. Finally, we played Bright Memory, the most demanding game of those we usually run. We set it to 120 frames per second with the highest setting that allows us the game. And look, in this case, if you tried to climb to 120 frames per second, it is something we had not seen in another cell phone. More than in the Galaxy S25 Ultra, but here was unable to reach up to 120 stable with moments of highs and lows reaching 46. So there were fluctuations that don't help the gaming experience much, and the temperature will be a problem, will be an issue. It is crucial that you play with the reduced graphics quality or at a lower frame rate to prevent the significant heat generation that this device can produce. In our test, the temperature reached an impressive 47.4 degrees Celsius, highlighting the importance of these adjustments. In conclusion, when it comes to price, this device competes directly against the Red Magic 11 Pro. I believe both devices are specially focused on gamers and high performance. This device features a nice design with metal frames, water and dust resistance, and a truly spectacular screen. However, what stands out the most about this cell phone is its sound quality. The collaboration with Bose undoubtedly elevates the sound to a whole new level. It is the best sound I have ever experienced in a cell phone. It has an incredibly strong bass presence, and this will undoubtedly be its most spectacular feature. It's odd since Poco usually focuses on power, but here it's more about sound. I'd prefer this speaker in a Redmi or Xiaomi device. Globally, it's in the Poco brand, which is strange. The front camera is simple, yet better than the Red Magic's front camera. The rear camera surpassed the Red Magic's. If it will prove to be a more attractive alternative for users who want high performance, but who also want a much more decent camera than those offered by Red Magic. The battery will also be good, charging speed good, connectivity very good with the new interconnectivity features that even allow you to link your cell phone to a Mac or an iPad. To control your cell phone from these devices, I think it's wonderful. However, the main issue with this performance was that it slightly worked against it. During the various tests we conducted, we noticed an unusual level of heating, which was higher than expected. Even when running applications and games, the temperature increased to over 47 degrees Celsius. Poco has mentioned having cooling mechanisms in the rear and external parts, but this doesn't seem very effective because the performance tends to drop occasionally. It is quite curious because Red Magic features a brutal cooling system, but their cameras are quite poor. This device, on the other hand, has much more competitive cameras, yet a cooling system that doesn't seem to help much. Thus, it will really depend on you as a user what you want to prioritize. What is recommended with this device is clearly to play with graphic settings that are not the highest possible, because in those scenarios it can lead to a very noticeable heating. And we've reached the end of this video. If you liked it, let us know. See you next time.